everyone, this is Penny here, and I thought I would just make a short little video to talk about my podcast, which is called From Stage to Page. And I started this last fall, and that was a difficult time because we were just entering the second wave of the pandemic. And here in Ontario, we were getting into some of the worst numbers yet. And being a musician, well, it's wasn't the best career choice to fit myself for a pandemic. But um, well, when you're in the arts and you're passionate about what you do, you know that the arts choose you. You don't choose the arts. So music chose me, specifically the piano, and holding on to it tightly. And so with the pandemic last fall and lots of my work temporarily on hold, I thought it would be a good idea to narrate some very old and wonderful stories. For a few years before the pandemic, I had been wanting to try narrating a book, an old book, specifically something nonfiction appealed to me. And I've always enjoyed old stories, really old things in general. um, and of course, the piano playing is really my main thing. You see a picture of Bach there, Mr. Bach. This is the music that I work so very hard on, and that is where my real true calling and my heart's deepest passion is, in playing the piano, specifically Bach's music. But I really do love old things, and I love old stories, and I love listening to people tell stories. I'm not very good at coming up with stories. I can create presentations like I used to before the pandemic for libraries and other public places where I go and give a talk about the history of the piano, and share stories that I've got stashed away in the notebooks. I have so many notebooks, but this storytelling idea was really calling to me last fall. I think because I was and still am by myself here, and then through all of that isolation in particular, reading old books by performing artists, lady performing artists from the late 19th and early 20th centuries was very appealing to me. I guess I saw in the headlines of the news so many not nice comments and things about ladies, and thought, well, maybe I can kind of mix my passion for old things and stories with sort of shedding some light and bringing to life some of the stories of some forgotten, neglected performers of yesteryear. And it was comfort. It has been very enjoyable for me to narrate these stories. And of course, many of them are in the public domain, and there's others. I get many of them off of the archive.org site, and most of these books, I think probably all of them are, if they're not in public domain, that they're out of print. they're not being published anymore, and so and I don't get anything for this. I really love to do it. It's good for my mental health to narrate these stories. I wish I could say I could do it all in one take. Alas, I have a sinus issue, and so we have to stop the recording every few minutes and give a loud clap so I can see on the audio file where to edit when I start coughing. But reading these stories has been good for my mental health, and it's also been good for my own playing and teaching, because hearing about the experiences of performing artists, whether they were dancers or an actress. Um, it all helps me. I feel like that helps me more than reading a book about piano literature. I kind of like to uh, play in the sandbox, in the dirt, as it were, rather than go to the acceptable, expected places to learn more about my instrument. I like to go off in the weeds and be alone and in the weeds of books and that are neglected, and bring those to light and be inspired myself. I have lots of notebooks and things. This one in particular, this nice little um, notebook here, is the one where I write down arts books by women long ago. So every time I come across a book that might work for the podcast, I write it down here. Um, I have done 5 books so far. One of them was just selections from, it wasn't the whole book, but that's 4 books for sure, the whole thing. Then that 5th one. And I'm on my 6th book now. That's the autobiography of Moura Limpany. So I'm halfway through narrating that. And I've got lots of books here. I go through them. I've got a stash of books there. As I mentioned, the archive.org site is really great, a great resource. And sometimes if you go back a few months later, you'll find that more has been added. That was the case. I had a very exciting discovery there just the other day, where a book that I had been looking for and had not been on that site for the longest time suddenly is, and I think it might work. I'm gonna keep it a secret now which one it is, but I think it's going to work for an upcoming book in the podcast. And so yeah, usually I'll just be I'll be going through a book, and there's a reference to another book and another book and another book, and I write it all down, and then I go on the internet and I find out who these people were that wrote them, and I find out some facts about them, and then I find it, look for the book and read through some of it. Much of the time, sad to say, because these books are well over 100 years old, most of them. Many of these books are from the 19th century even. The language and the vocabulary, the social customs, the privileges of certain groups of people were much more, even hard to believe, but much more pronounced than today. And so I've had some inner conflicts with this podcast series. That's why there was such a gap in episodes for a few months there earlier this year. It's not that I wasn't trying to find material. Believe me, I must have went through about a dozen books. But at the end of the day, even though there's wonderful stories to be told in many of these books by lady performing artists of the past, I am just not comfortable with narrating certain phrases, certain racist. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to wrap my head around. I didn't think about that when I started the podcast, and so that's a little bit of naivety there for sure. But I'm learning, and trying to share as much as I can these stories. Of course, I only choose to narrate the books that I enjoy. As um, as Arthur Rubinstein used to say, the pianist, as he used to say, play what you love and you will play it well. And that's certainly true at the piano. I think it's true with narrating too. If you love what you're reading, you will read it well. And I think being a pianist, I have kind of a right to read these books by especially the ones by the pianists like Ethel Newcomb, and the one by Annette Hullah. Those were about Leschetizky, Theodore Leschetizky, a great piano teacher in Vienna in the 19th century. And now this one by pianist Maura Limpany as well. Um, and I read these books through, and I sometimes take notes, and I think to myself, oh, this is good. Oh, yeah, this will work. And then I go back, and then that's when I begin my recording of the chapters. So each book gets 2 full read-throughs. Sometimes I find a word that I don't know how to pronounce, a name, and I have to look it up. I do my best. I am not a linguist. I have no training in diction other than when I used to accompany singers in school. But it's just me using my musical instincts to hopefully articulate these books in a meaningful way. And then the editing is something that I have very little skill in that area. Basically, I just know how to sort of cut out the coughing and the noises and cars going by and things like that. But I use GarageBand for that, and it works fine for my needs. I see on my for the podcast the stats or the analytics that it's had almost 1,000 plays. My podcast has, so that's nice. And seeing as it's just a sort of a side project that I do for my own enjoyment. I would love to keep it going. I really would. Goodness knows there are plenty of books to be narrated, and as far as I know, none of them have. There's just some wonderful material. So any support that is received in the form of either subscribing to the podcast or giving it a nice rating, a 5-star rating or 4-star even on the iTunes or the podcast, Apple Podcast, or buying me a coffee or lemonade, as I like to say on Ko-fi. That's all certainly appreciated, and I've had some very nice. I've had some positive feedback from a few folks, and I can see there's been listeners from all over the world, mostly North America and Europe. So that's interesting. And I've also seen from the analytics that it's largely, it tells me it's largely females who listen to this between the ages of basically 20s, 30s, and 40s, in that age group, and some older ladies as well in 60s and 70s. So apparently this content is of interest to that demographic, and that's cool. And yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to share. I just thought I would do a casual little chat about this podcast, and I better get to recording chapter 6 now of Maura Limpany's autobiography. She was a British pianist. She only died, not that long ago, really. 1916 she was born. I don't have her dates in front of me. I think it was 2005 that she died. But she certainly had a lot of hardships in her life. She had an incredible memory and ability to learn very difficult pieces quickly. That is something I do not possess. I am very slow learning pieces. I am very thorough and very slow, and therefore a small repertoire. But apparently she could learn things quite quickly. And she had some interesting stories in the previous chapter that I just uploaded about the Second World War and her brother who was killed in duty. And of her travels and her love for nice clothes, and how she would style her hair and the colors of the dresses she would wear, and describing a place like a villa, a cottage kind of a thing in Italy that she had. And I love reading these books and getting little details, about the color of the walls and the carpet, and what the clothes look like and what the dishes look like. And I like to paint a picture in my head. And when there's fast dialogue too, back and forth, I like that as well. So I'm really enjoying her book. What other ones? I mentioned that there were two that I wrote, that I narrated rather, by students of Theodore Leschetizky. I really enjoyed those. As a matter of fact, I own those books, and somewhere, uh, I don't know if you can see, I got like lots of books here. I'm always working on projects. We'll see what I can come up with next. Hopefully something. Club 88 is something I'm thinking of right now. 88 keys on the piano. Nightclub, Club 88. We'll see what I come up with. But there were so many quotes in those two books by Ethel Newcomb and Annette Hulla, both female pianists of the late 19th, early 20th centuries, talking about their studies with Theodore Leschetizky. And there was just so much good stuff in those books alone that I had to take another little notebook here and title it My Favorite Leschetizky Quotes. So I was going through those books and writing down the quotes that I thought were particularly useful to me as a pianist. Because it's helpful to have these things to pull out, especially if you're adjudicating or teaching and you don't want to just say the same thing again, like, well played, can you articulate more effectively? You want to have something clever to say, like, get more happiness into your tempos. Or most books are worse than useless. There's so many great things. Keep the joy of life in you. Beethoven knew what he was doing, I can tell you, and one must play as if one understood him. This type of thing. This turns my crank, as the old saying goes. Yeah, and I also narrated Maud Allan. I think it was called My Life and Dancing. She was a dancer who also studied piano at quite an advanced level, and that was an interesting book. And she did this famous Salome dance for the King of England, and this is like around 1900 or so. And she had this intensely evocative costume that she came up with, and she talks about the costume in the book and her interest in Greek dancing and the clothes that those dancers wore, and about there's a lot of details in that book too. And she liked fairies, and that was interesting to hear her talk about how she loves to be alone and imagining the fairies and conjure up the spirits. It's a little bit of a childlike kind of sense of wonder, which really resonates with me. So that book was enjoyable, and I narrated some selections from Landowska on music, a book about Wanda Landowska, harpsichord player. What else? There was I'm drawing up. Oh, and Sarah Bernhardt, the divine Sarah, the actress Sarah Bernhardt. And is there any other Sarah Bernhardt? I don't think so. So of her writings, she wrote an autobiography, but I could. There were some things in there that I just couldn't. I can't bring myself to record my voice saying certain words. Just can't do it. It's an interesting issue because these stories do need to be told, but maybe not by me in a recorded fashion for the world to listen to. But I would encourage anyone listening to the podcast to explore on the archive site in particular, because those resources are free and open to everyone. And go through some of these books. Sarah Bernhardt's autobiography, Isadora Duncan, Sophie Tucker, Grace Moore, Tallulah Bankhead. There's just like I could go on and on and on. There's some books that I do want to find there was a piano teacher by the name of Matilda Verne who was quite famous in England in the late 19th, early 20th century, and she was a student of Clara Schumann. Clara Schumann, of course, was the wife of Robert Schumann, amazing composer. And Matilda Verne had a couple of sisters, and they were all exceptional musicians, but Matilda seemed to be like the big name kind of thing. And she wrote a book called Chords of Remembrance, which I'm not able to find. Well, I guess if I were very, very wealthy, then I could afford some of these rare books that are extremely expensive. But that's one I'm after. I also would like to find A Bundle of Time, which was written by Harriet Cohen, another English pianist who had quite a sense of style. If you look up pictures of her, she's like, wow, that is someone with a very unique sense of presentation and always curious outfits. You want to zoom the picture up on your screen to see closer what she was wearing. Those two books are ones that I'd like to find. I think there might be another, but I can't remember at the moment. Anyhow, and was that, oh, and the Sarah Bernhardt one that I mentioned, that was a short story that she wrote called In the Clouds, and I really enjoyed that one. I had never narrated fiction before, so I had to come up with some voices, and that's this, I'm finding that narrating, even of nonfiction, really relies on my musical skills, how I would shape a phrase and the kind of articulation, except that it's all in my mouth instead of my hands. So I've been enjoying listening to my voice as I speak in those podcasts to try to make the story come to life in a calm way. I want my podcasts episodes to be calming as well as entertaining and interesting. So thanks for coming with me on this little journey here, and keep listening. I hope you will tune in. I don't have a regular schedule that I post these episodes, but as long as I can find material to narrate that I'm passionate about, I will keep it going. So if you want to help support me, you can treat me to a coffee or to a notepad or an eraser, whatever you want to call it. A couple of bucks is always appreciated. And until then, or until whenever, I'm not sure I'll ever even meet you, whoever's listening to this. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support in whatever fashion that happens. Be safe and enjoy the rest of your summer. Bye bye.